Starting again. So moving on from music emotion recognition to actually the next logical step that I would think is music induction through computer generated music. So we're trying to induce music through affective algorithmic composition. So now this is a truly interdisciplinary problem, as one can see. It requires knowledge not only from mathematics and computing, but also you need to have certain basis knowledge from cognitive psychology and of course music theory. And now, as Casey now also said, there are new inputs from brain physiology and social psychology as well. Brain physiology in the sense that now you can actually measure through functional MRIs the different active areas of your brain when you actually listen to music. And there's also been a study which has used EEG data to actually generate affective music. And social psychology, although it seems a little counterintuitive, it is also important because you can see a large gender difference in certain music areas such as heavy metal. And in that sense as well, music is also a very social tool. So that's why you need to have inputs from there as well. So now moving on, there are three important areas that I want to discuss in a streamlined fashion. First one is obviously emotions in music. What are the emotion models that we use in order to classify emotions in music? And also how emotions are either expressed or induced, that philosophical standpoint there. The next is musical structure and correlations to emotionality. So obviously we're looking at structural aspects of music and how they can be varied in order to express different emotions. And thirdly, obviously, what kind of compositional methods have been used in order to generate affective music. So first I want to discuss the philosophical standpoint. I think the previous speaker also mentioned this. So there are the first difference that is made is emotivist versus cognitivist. So an emotivist believes that emotions are induced due to musical stimuli, while a cognitive states that emotions can only be expressed or represented. So both them differ in the sense that emotions can either be only expressed or induced. So there's a clear difference there. Another viewpoint is absolutist versus referentialist. So the absolutist says that the musical meaning of a piece is self-contained, which means it needs to be listened to in isolation in order to actually get an idea of what is trying to be expressed. While a referentialist obviously believes that the context behind which you actually listen to music and experience it is also very important. And the third is actually subdivision of the absolutist viewpoint. It says formalist, it's differentiation between formalist and expressionist, where the formalist says that the meaning is primarily intellectual, which is derived by actually studying the score or studying the structure of the music itself. And expressionist says the main source of value that a musical piece has is through the emotions that are evoked in the listener. Now, obviously, these are not scientific viewpoints that can be logically coded, really. These are standpoints that need to be considered because it's important to actually see what process by which music induces emotions in the listener. So as a scientist, we would really want to go with the expressionist viewpoint because we want to induce certain emotions in the listener. And obviously, we also want to believe that musical structure has a big play in how music is induced. So now moving on to the first major subdivision that I talked about, the different emotion models that are used. Now this is not a case of emotion recognition per se, where you would study a piece of music and try to guess or try to evaluate what kind of emotions it expresses, but we are actually going the other direction, where we have a certain emotional model which maps certain emotions to certain musical structures, and then we can use that emotional model to actually generate music. So there are three different emotional models that are have been mostly used to generate affective music. The first one and the most popular one is the circumplex or the two-dimensional model of emotion. This was introduced by Russell in a paper in 1980. So this is basically, he describes a plane in which the two Cartesian coordinates represent valence and arousal. Now what valence means is the polarity of the emotion, that which means is it either positive or negative. And arousal describes the amount of energy. So suppose you want a happy emotion, it would be positive valence and high arousal. And similarly, if you want a sad emotion, it would be negative valence and low arousal. The second is a discrete emotional model, in which you just use certain adjectives to actually describe the musical experience. So this can be happy, sad, angry, fearful, disgusted. So you just so these free varying terms are used to describe the music induced, the emotion induced by the music. And the third one is the Geneva Emotional Music Scale, which is the most recent, and it's also very domain specific in the sense that it was designed in order to be used with music, emotions with music really. So what the Geneva Emotional Music Scale does is it uses 9 different adjectives that describe different feelings in music, and a user can basically describe the feeling induced by the music in any of these 9 different scales. So it's an adaptation of the discrete emotional model, I would say. Now this is a graph from a paper by Vygotsky and Irola, in which they actually compared different emotional models with along with accounting for personality biases and intensity of experiences. So what they realized was, or what they found, was that there is a lot of redundancy in both the GEMS and the discrete emotional model. And personality biases also account for a lot of discrepancy here, because it was found that extroverted persons would rate their intensity of emotional experience much more than introverted people. And so what this graph tries to describe is the amount of variation that you can see. So they did a principal component analysis basically in order to see what were the major causes of variation in the emotional data. So they found that 89.9% of the variance can be attributed to 2 different components, component 1 and component 2, which can be said as valence and energy. So it's very similar to valence and arousal really. So you can see that different points are marked based on the dimensional model, discrete emotions, and GEMS model. So in this case, you can see that component 1 is obviously valence. So you can see negative valence on one side and positive valence on the other. And the component 2 is energy or arousal, really. High energy on top and low energy on the bottom. So you can see even with the GEMS model, most of the emotional adjectives that were used could be actually described within these 2 components, or as even a combination of these 2 components. And even with the discrete emotional model, it's very similar, because a lot of these adjectives are really very subjective in their description. I mean, different people would describe a piece of music with a similar cluster of adjectives, but they would use different words to describe it. So it gets a little harder that way. So if you compare, or if you look at the comparison made by Vygotsky and Irola, we can see that the 2D model had the highest discriminative accuracy when they did a cluster analysis to actually see which emotional model described or discriminated between musical emotions the best. They found that the 2-dimensional model was found to be the most efficient. And as I said before, GEMS and discrete emotional models were found to have scale redundancies, in that all the emotions that they tried to scale could be described within those 2 components of valence and energy. And the discrete emotional model also attenuated intensity of experience emotions, because certain personalities find it easier to describe their emotions using adjectives, while certain personalities think it's not really applicable, or it doesn't really fit with what they want to describe the music with. So that was definitely a problem. Another thing that we see is, as I said, 89.9% of the variance was accounted by two factors, which is valence and arousal. But there was a difference in the amount of variation that accounted for these two as well. Valence accounted for 54% of variance, and the rest, 30, 35% is accounted for by arousal. So there isn't, obviously, both those scales are not equal in their division, really. Now moving on to the second major subdivision of my talk, musical form and emotional correlations. Now, if we try to understand how musical structure was formed in the or in Western classical music, really, it's really mired in 17th century thought, primarily because uh, the reputation of these composers was more important in describing the direction of musical theory. So a lot of composers would actually compose music, and then theoreticians would actually, when a bulk of such music was available, theoreticians would analyze that and then use the most common structural features and theorize those, really. So, so that's the problem. But since we have been using such a structural description of music for such a long time, it's just become cemented in our understanding of music. So, and it does suffice in what we use it for as well. Another thing that I want to point out is that movement form is very well addressed regarding consonance and dissonance in one particular uh, point in time. But long form is still a little vague, in the sense that, of course, in modern music you can see this see changes within a section of music where it goes from the intro to a verse to chorus and then back again. While in classical music this does not really is not really evident. So in that sense, moment form is much more important to music theory than long form or overall form of a particular musical piece. And there are two different compositional approaches that have been described. First one is bottom up or material driven, in which you compose, say, a small piece of melody first and then build your music around it. And top down, which is template driven. So you have this template of intro, verse, however you want to compose it, and then you fill in those parts specifically. So now, Gabrielson and Lindstrom actually have a very extensive paper on what different musical structures correlate to different emotions. So I'm going to just run through the major ones first. So tempo. Tempo is obviously the the speed at which a music is perceived. Now, tempo is also a little difficult to analyze here, because there is a score tempo which the composer describes, and there's a perceived tempo, which basically has invokes physiological response. You tap your foot to it, or your breathing tends to balance out within that tempo. And it was found that tempo is directly related to the level of arousal or energy in music. And its effect on balance is dependent on other musical contexts, such as mode and harmonic context, which I'll be discussing next. So mode is a set of musical pitches used in an interval. Now, in Western music described using the diatonic scale, which means there are 12 subdivisions of 12 pitch subdivisions within one interval. And there are certain modes or collections of pitches which have been described to evoke sadness and to evoke happiness. So the Aeolian mode, which is also commonly called the natural minor mode, has been linked to negative valence. So say sadness and just negative feelings in general. and the Ionian mode, which is also known as the major mode, has been linked to positive balance. Loudness or dynamism of the music has been directly related to greater arousal, which means that the louder the music, the greater arousal it would cause, while its effect on balance is highly dependent on the modal context. So suppose if you're using a loud piece of music is composed in the Ionian scale, it would be happy and have more arousal, and vice versa. Pitch. Now, how pitch is separated from loudness is because the diatonic scale repeats. So you can have so after every 12 semitones, this you would have the same note, but at a higher pitch, really. So that's how pitch is differentiated, and it's been found that a high pitch is generally related to positive balance. Now, rhythm has a very complicated relationship with both balance and arousal, because if rhythm just determines the amount of in a way the complexity of the song with relation to the harmonic context and the tempo, because the rhythm can be perceived in different ways. Suppose if you have an song in odd meter, you would say it's a complex rhythm, and such complexity is usually associated with negative balance, but it's also highly dependent upon the modal context. So in this sense, it's not it's the correlations are rather vague. And articulation is a performative aspect which basically determines the length of the note sustained. So there are two different types of articulations that are mainly discussed in literature. First one is staccato articulation, which means that it's a high attack and high dispersal as well. So you just play and leave it. So you don't sustain the note. While in legato, each note leads to the other. So it's smooth, and staccato is rather rough. And it's been found that the note length is inversely proportional to arousal. So staccato would mean shorter note length and higher arousal. Legato, longer note length and lower arousal. Now moving on to the third subdivision, I'm going to try and compile the methods that have been used so far in order to create affected music. The thing is, this is still a very new stage of research. So the amount of studies that actually describe affective algorithmic composition are a handful. So I can actually enumerate them one after the other. But in most cases, a rule-based approach with a streamlined architecture is popular, primarily because the basic emotion to musical structural correlations have been described, and researchers generally tend to use such correlations in order to make an algorithm. So first we're going to discuss the natural computing methods that have been used. Now it's also interesting to note that these two studies, this one and the next one that I'm going to talk about, did not actually use musical correlations, did not actually depend on musical correlations as much as the others. So what Legaspi and the others tried to do is they used user feedback on certain musical excerpts and used inductive logical programming to generate a certain set of rules, which formed as the basis for which were used in the basis for a fitness function for a genetic algorithm, which was used for musical composition. So this was a machine learning approach used by Legaspi. And the second one was using a neural network. So we used a spread activation neural network. It was designed where the nodes actually had different nodes were attributed to moods, sentiment, emotions, and expressive emotions. So they used a scale, or they used an emotional plane where the two different coordinates for inner mood and outer mood, and then they used the mapping from this particular uh, plane to actually influence the harmonic and temporal aspects of the music. Now moving on to simpler methods, we can see Livingstone et al. Used a simple rule-based mapping between valence and arousal space to structural and performative musical features. This was probably the most complicated development there was, an algorithmic music emotional engine where they used a pipelined architecture composed of producers and generators which were dependent on an emotion mapper to actually describe the emotion of the music. And finally, Wallace et al. Implemented two different implementations based on the same idea, where they used valence arousal space to map musical structures and performative features. Now, just overview of the algorithmic music evolution engine. What they try to do is all these different producers actually produce certain different scale aspects of the music, in the sense that one can produce melody, harmony, etc. And the emotion mapper actually controls the emotion expressed. But the emotion mapper, which was used here, actually used 10 different adjective terms to describe emotions, and each of these adjective terms would be described on a scale of 0 to 100, and all of those scales would add up to a total of 100. And then you would use the contribution of each particular emotion to a particular musical structure, and that would be mapped. What's actually a little absurd is that the authors did not describe how they actually calculate the contribution of each emotion to each musical structure. So that was a little confusing. Moving on to the next by Wallace. This is actually one of the complicated one of the two implementations that they had, where they completely differentiate between arousal and valence, and then associate certain musical structures with arousal and certain with valence, and then they use this to actually control the rhythm, timing, harmony, which goes to a note generation engine. So now those were the main techniques that have been used so far. So to enumerate, there has been no real consensus on which emotion model to use to actually map emotions to musical structures. The 2D model was found to be most efficient by Bukowski and Erola, but there are certain variations that have still not been accounted for. And there are also arguments which state that the 2D model would not be sufficient. But as the study shows that the other discrete emotion model and even the GEMS have large-scale redundancies in them. So the 2D model is most efficient, but I think moving on, we would need to examine the relationship between valence and arousal, and also maybe even introduce a third coordinate there, which could be either tension or dominance, which could help us differentiate between emotions such as fear and anger, because both fear and anger would be classified as high arousal and high negative valence. So you need another coordinate to differentiate between such emotions as well. And as I've discussed before as well, movement form was given prime importance, where long-term form was rather, it was not even described, even not even considered. And as the previous speaker mentioned as well, music familiarity and memory matters. So in the sense of music induction, you need to take into account that the listener has certain expectations and certain musical memory, even in the sense that loudness is only judged by the overall average loudness of the musical piece. So loudness can be different, the scale of loudness can be different when you consider two different pieces, but within one piece, it is just judged by the average amount of loudness that the piece has. And compositional models haven't really taken the listener into account, as I said before, just due to music familiarity and memory and expectations that have not been modeled yet. It's heavily just dependent upon the correlations between emotions and musical structures. And also, most of the approaches that I talked about have used only the template-driven approach, movement form. while the AMEE was the only one which sort of combines the bottom-up and top-down approaches. We also need better transitional models, because if you are generating music in real time and you want to change the emotion, you can't have abrupt transitions, because they obviously would cause a negative emotional affect, which would actually affect the original emotion that you're trying to induce into the listener. And timbre and texture also need to be incorporated. Direction for future research. It's very important to take the listener into account and model musical memory, expectation, familiarity. In this sense, combining statistical methods which actually define a statistical measure for the whole long-term form with rule-based approaches would be useful. Performative aspects need to be improved, primarily because all the studies that we have seen, even in real time, the note generation engine is just a MIDI engine, and MIDI sounds very harsh because it has no overtone aspects to it. And so that really affects how a listener would react to the particular generated music. Music production rules are really important, but this is much further down the line, because what music production tries to establish is that certain different instruments don't occupy the same frequency ranges, and even if they do, one of them is either suppressed so that the listener's attention can be on the particular aspect of the music that you want the listener to be attentive to. And obviously, as we see with the information technology boom and on the internet, with sites like Facebook, where you can actually go and like your band pages, or even on last.fm, which actually catalogs all the music that you listen to. You can use this amount of metadata to actually make individualized generation algorithms. So, and to conclude, it's an important and exciting area of research, but it is still rather new. With the multidisciplinary nature of the research, it becomes rather complex to even formulate problems sometimes. And but it can only get better with the increasing amount of data that we have. So that is my presentation.